I always say anything that you do, it's not successful unless somebody supports it. If the community doesn't support the grocery store, it's not going to be successful.
Welcome to Workin It Out, a podcast from Porchlight about the things that affect the rural workforce. My name is Burke Ermintrout, and I'm the Director of Policy and Communities here at Porchlight. Our guest today is Ryan Jensen, a business owner in Wessington Springs, South Dakota. Ryan Jensen, welcome to Workin It Out.
Thank you, Bert.
Good to have you here. All right, so my goal with our conversation today is to explore basically the idea that you and your family chose to move back to a rural community and run local businesses. So many rural communities are desperate for stories like yours, so I thought we'd explore that. But let's start with where you're from, Wessington Springs. For those who aren't familiar, where's Wessington Springs and what's it like?
So Wessington Springs is about, I would say, 2 hours northwest of Sioux Falls.
Okay.
45 minutes from Mitchell, 50 minutes from Mitchell, 45 minutes from Huron, kind of between Mitchell and Pierre on Highway 34. West Springs is a small rural community. Population is about 900, give or take a few. Located at the foothills of South Dakota.
Yep.
Kind of where the hills start, going west. And we are located right at the bottom of those. So
Nice. And you grew up in Wessington Springs?
technically,
right?
I did not grow up in Wessington Springs. I grew up in Alpena, which it's about 15 miles from Wessington Springs. I went to church in Wessington Springs. My mom is from Wessington Springs originally. I had grandparents in Wessington Springs. So, you could say I grew up there, but my home was in Alpena also. So, and that's where I went to high school, was Alpena High School.
Got it. Yes, absolutely. And that's true for a lot of rural communities.
It is.
There's several small communities all nearby, but everyone is from that specific community, right?
Yes, exactly.
So, would love to hear a little bit about what it was like growing up in that area. I don't know if you have any stories that kind of capture what it was like, but
it was amazing growing up in a small community. Growing up in Alpena, South Dakota, a town of 250 people. I had 14 people in my 14 classmates. But it was great. A lot of those classmates are still my best friends.
Yep.
To this day. So we keep in touch and we get together often. Actually, many of my classmates are still around the area, and running businesses of their own too. So pretty amazing. Growing up something like that. So I fortunately graduated with a cousin, and then I also had another cousin in Wessington Springs that we were all the same age, and that's how I got to know a lot of people in Wessington Springs, is because I had family relatives over there. So coming back to Wessington Springs was kind of like coming home, because I knew I was very familiar with the community, very familiar. We went to church there growing up, and knew many people in the community already. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome. One of the themes that we continue to explore at Porchlight is the role agriculture plays and doesn't play in small towns, and how that's kind of changing. So I'm curious for your perspective on the presence of ag in the ag economy in Wessington Springs, but I know there's a lot that happens outside of that too.
There is. The ag economy is huge in Wessington
Yep.
Springs. That's really what keeps our community thriving, is the ag community. We're fortunate that we have that in our community, because I don't know, we're not a urban area with a lot of businesses, a lot of industrial businesses. A lot of the businesses in our community are ag businesses that supply employees for the community. And I would say, where I grew up in Alpena, because we are kind of talking about rural,
Yep.
I would say, Alpena is a big employer of ag, in the ag sector. I don't know if you want me to name businesses, but
Yeah.
H&H is a fertilizer, seed, all that kind of stuff. H&H Solutions is what it's called. It's an ag company. My cousin actually owns part of it, is in a partnership along with Brett Heesen. They employ, I don't know what it is, but they have a good number of employees that they're able to employ. So Come back to Washington Springs. We have a couple of fertilizer plants over in that area, Wilbur Ellis and Ag Tiger, which are big corporations, but smaller on our scale, and employ quite a few people in that sector. So it's important. The ag
Yeah.
is definitely an important part of our community and a part of our economy in Washington Springs.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And what you were, I mean, as you were describing where Washington Springs is, I mean, it's a kind of a classic ag community. It's not really close to any of the other big communities, right?
It's really not.
It's
No,
it's meant to be, or it's a community that is surrounded by farmland and all those things, and then it's kind of the ag hub for that area. So.
it certainly is. We have 281 is 6 miles to the east, and Highway 34 intersects with that. We call it the junction, a 6 mile junction. So, you have your own words in the rural America of where things are. So,
You bet, you bet.
so yes.
So we're going to get to your businesses in just a second, but I would love to hear a little bit about, I believe you came back to the Washington
I
Springs
did,
area.
yep.
So where did you go?
I'll
And
kinda-
then what's the story of how you came
Yeah,
back?
I'll kind of tell you a little bit of history about where it was. I actually came to Southeast Tech right out of high school. I came to Southeast Tech here in Sioux Falls. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do something business. So I actually went to Southeast Tech and got my associate's degree in business finance. I lived here for a couple of years after that, and then I actually got called back home to our local co-op to do the accounting work at our local co-op in Alpena. So I did that for a couple of years, and I decided, I really wanted to get my bachelor's degree. So that was kind of a goal of mine. I kind of knew where I wanted to be, wanted to do. So I went to Dakota Wesleyan to get my bachelor's degree. At that time, I believe it was the private schools were only accepting transfer credits from technical schools. So all my credits had transferred at that time. Now it's growing,
Yep.
from there, but that was 20 some years ago. So I went back to Dakota Wesleyan. I was considered a non-trad student. I worked full time at a consulting group, telecommunications consulting group, while I went to school, and then I got into the banking world after that, and I worked not quite full time, I guess, as a teller at the First Dakota National Bank. Was my first job, and worked there as I went to school, and worked kind of my way into the banking and became a business banker in Mitchell, South Dakota, and then met my wife. In that time, she actually was going to physical therapy school, planning to go to physical therapy school. She hadn't gone yet, and she was going to Des Moines. So we're like, how's this going to work? I already had a job. I had a job, and I was kind of set in Mitchell, established in Mitchell. She was going off to school, so we made it work, and that's just what we did. From the banking, I then we was a banker for I don't know how many years, and my wife then came back to Mitchell and was a physical therapist. So we lived there for about 10 years. I lived in Mitchell for about 10 years, and we decided we actually were planning on building a house over by Mount Vernon. We were going to send our kids to a smaller school. We were going to still work in Mitchell. And then the opportunity came available for my wife, who is not from Washington Springs, not even close by. She's actually from Inwood, Iowa, closer to Sioux Falls here. The opportunity came available for a physical therapy position in Washington Springs. And my parents were living in Washington Springs, and we wanted our kids to kind of grow up closer to grandparents. We both grew up close to our grandparents, and it seemed to be we were going that way more often and more often. So like, well, the opportunity, I mean, not every day you find a professional job like that in a small community, in a small hospital setting. So we decided, well, she would take the job and something would open up for me in a small community. And actually, so I called a local bank to see if there's anything available, and fortunately enough, there was something available. So I started working at American Bank and Trust in Washington Springs. We moved back home and have built our lives in Washington Springs, and have 5 children. Ages are from junior to 3 years old right now. So junior in high school to 3 years old right now. So we're busy, but we love it, and our kids love it, and glad to be back home. So.
Absolutely. That it sounds like you didn't always know that you were going to go back to that community.
I really didn't know I was going to go back to that community.
Yeah.
I actually was. I'm going to live in Sioux Falls. I am going to be this big city guy. Have no interest really at that point, in high school of going back home. But as I grew, as life, as you have kids and different things develop, there are different things that are important, and that's important to us. Growing up in a smaller community, having our the teachers know our kids. The teachers know us personally. I don't know. There's something to be said about that in a small community. So
certainly,
yeah.
We look at a lot of the data in Porchlight, and this is a trend that we see a lot of times. The conversation is, well, all the kids are leaving the rural communities, and that's leaving the rural communities dying. But when you look at the data, what's happening is a lot of folks have stories very similar to yours of you leave after high school for education. Some of those new experiences. And then as you start having kids and growing family, the draw of your home community or home area gets stronger. And we see a lot of folks who, they leave in their teens, but then in their late 20s or early 30s, that's when they start coming back to their rural communities. And then you just have to find your pathway back. And it sounds like that kind of opened up for your wife and then for you. And
it did. It did. Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, Amy, and you talked about some of those benefits, knowing you're a small school where you can know all the teachers and a place where your kids can play and have kind of that experience that you had as a kid. I don't know if there are other benefits of living in a small community that really stand out to you.
Oh, there really is. I mean, everyone's family.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone is looking out for everyone's looking out for everyone. If someone's sick, if someone unfortunately has an illness that's taken. I mean, there's benefit after benefit for those individually, and I've been very blessed to be part of a lot of those individual, to be the giving part of it, and I always think, doing that, someday I might have to be the receiving part. I don't know. I hope not, but just being part of that, and everybody really helps each other out, and it's so fortunate to be able to be like that. Not everyone in the urban areas get that opportunity, unfortunately, and I just think it's just important. But it's the way I grew up. That's the way I grew up. So I'm used to it, and I'm fortunate that I wanted to find my way back. After experiencing different areas in South Dakota. So
sure,
yeah,
great. Let's talk a little bit about the businesses you have in Washington Springs. So you have Springs Food Market and Jensen's True Value.
Correct.
Right?
Yep, that's
so
correct.
How did they get started? Did you buy them or did you start them?
I did buy them.
Bought them?
No,
Okay,
I bought them. No, it was actually really it's been a long kind of a family-owned business, not by my family, but by a different family. And I honestly don't even know how. So I was a banker at the time. I don't even know. I kind of always have wanted to own my own businesses. I grew up, my grandpa owned 4 elevators, grain elevators in South Dakota. So my dad owns a construction company in Washington Springs and still runs it. So I just think that's kind of embedded in me to own my own business, and I always wanted to own my own business of some sort, and retail always just seemed to fit me. I love visiting with people. I love helping people, those kinds of things. And I enjoyed banking, but it was just different going back to your home community doing banking. So I knew that it was for sale. I heard it was for sale. So I just went to the owner and said, is this something you think I can do? And I love seeing people. And at the time, it was in 2013, kind of a slow down in the economy and whatnot. And, I went to my boss, and after I decided to do this, I said, people have to eat. People don't always have to pay their loans back. So it was just kind of a joke that we had. No, I was sad to leave the banking world, but I'm happy to be where I am today. So I bought the grocery store first, and then the opportunity came. The owners came to me and asked me, about the hardware store, if that's something that I'd be interested in. I just, was it the right time, wrong time? I'm not sure. I just, for my community, I couldn't see, they were looking to retire. I just really couldn't see closing a business in Washington Springs. So that's kind of how the hardware store came about. But so now we own the grocery, or our family owns the grocery store and the hardware store. And about 2 years ago, we actually conjoined them together. So they weren't conjoined together, when we purchased them, right adjacent to the grocery store was actually a museum. Well, they were looking to expand a little bit. We were looking to downsize a little bit because we carried some of the same products in the grocery store, and it didn't make sense to do that. So we actually did a flip flop of buildings. So the museum moved to the east end of the street, and the hardware store moved just adjacent to the grocery store. And we cut a hole in the wall, so it's kind of like a mini Walmart. I mean, per se, kind of have everything under one roof. So yeah,
That's a great, I love kind of how that, where you ended there. It feels like a very solution you can find in a small town. We're like,
Right.
okay, museum needs to grow. We need to shrink the hardware store a little bit because we're finding efficiencies here. And we'll just swap and figure it out, and we'll cut a
That's-
hole in the wall. And then,
and that's what we did. We swapped and we figured it out. We had no plan.
Yep,
I mean,
yep.
at the hardware store, there was, many, many years of stuff up there. But we just moved it and figured it out what we were going to do with it. So, and that's just what you have to do. So,
That's awesome. So when I mean, we don't have to get into too many details here, but did you know the owners before you went to buy from them, or
I
was
did.
that
Yep,
okay?
I knew that. Yep, they're local people.
Right.
Yeah, so I knew who they were. I've known them for a lot of my life. So
Yep.
I sure did. So yep.
Awesome. What are the things as so I guess you've had the grocery store for about 12 years
About 12
now.
years. Yep. 12
What
12 years.
has kind of made it successful for you? What are the things that you've found made
Customer
customers-
service.
Yeah.
I mean, customer service is the number one thing. You just, for the people in your community and the surrounding communities that come and support your store, you go above and beyond, and you do whatever you have to do for those individuals, because that's why you're there. I always say anything that you do, it's not successful unless somebody supports it. If the community doesn't support the grocery store, it's not going to be successful. So, we just really, customer service, and that's always been a big part of me. I'm a people pleaser. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I like to see people happy, and I think that's what makes it probably the most successful.
Yeah, you bet. What advice would you have for people who are thinking about returning to their hometown and they're thinking about, I'd like to own a small business in my hometown, but they're thinking, do I try and start one? Do I try and figure out if someone wants to sell theirs? I mean, I don't expect you to have all the answers,
Right.
but you've been through this. I think people would be curious
I've
to hear
been
about
through
that.
it. Do your research. Do your research. I mean, I know, if you've grown up in the community, those people that are still the older people in the community appreciate any young person to come back to carry on the things of a community. Because let's be real, not everyone lives forever. Not as the generations grow older, they're not able to sustain a community like they were. If it was 20 years prior to that. Do research. There's so many opportunities out there of being able to work remote. With the technology that we have, if that is available, I would say go for it. If you're able to do that, move back to a smaller community to where your kids can enjoy a smaller school setting. And I'm telling you, you'll appreciate that you did it if you're able to do it. As far as being, in rural communities, unfortunately, there's not always businesses for sale, or they're family businesses that just get handed down from generation to generation. Or maybe it's something that an individual can buy into. Ask questions. Go to your local chamber of commerce if you have one, or your city, and ask if there's any opportunities in the area. They're going to probably be the first ones to know, or just go ask a business person, on Main Street. Sometimes I hear more than I want to hear, but people come to me for a lot of information because I know it, because people, I don't tell me for some reason, but it's funny. There was a retired school teacher that anything that she needed, any question that she had, they just moved, they were new into the area. Any question they had, of course, I saw her, introduced myself to her, first, probably one of the first people, because usually when you come to the grocery store, if I don't know you, I'm gonna ask you, and I'm gonna ask if you're here to stay or if you're just passing through, or what your plans are, and got a good relationship. And anything that she has a question on, she typically asks me, which I feel fortunate. If I don't know it, I'm gonna find out for her before I answer. So I typically would know an answer where to go. So um, I know I got kind of off track there, but with that being said, go to the people that run the community, which are your main street businesses, and ask if there's any opportunities. There might be something hidden that nobody else knows, and that might be an opportunity for them. So, yeah.
That's great. And I think that kind of leads into the next question I was thinking about, or what are kind of the resources that you were able to tap into and look at as you were thinking about, taking over a small business? How did you figure out, what do I need to know? I mean, you kind of come from the banking world, so that probably helped a bit.
Right. That did help me. I have a business background, a banking world. I did loans, for businesses of this magnitude. But the big things are, and it's something I haven't actually tapped into at this point. But using some of your small business SBDC, small business development centers, to do some of those things. I shouldn't say I haven't tapped into them. I have tapped into those. I have not tapped into the small business administration loans at this point, and that might be something that comes about. But I have gotten projections and paperwork from the SBDC, Small Business Development Center, which are very helpful, and that's something that if you're looking, they'll run numbers for you, and that's what you need. So as you're going to get bank loans and those kind of things. Also, if there is a Chamber of Commerce Development Center in the community, tap into those. And there's different programs that smaller rural communities get funding for, grants for, that are able to be utilized also. So, yeah.
Definitely. You touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of the reception in the community as they found, okay, someone new is taking over the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
It's been long-time owners.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like, probably people are often excited to see younger folks taking on new things in the community, but there may have been some apprehension too, I imagine, of just kind of things turning over. I don't know. What was the experience like?
No, I was pretty fortunate.
Yeah.
I honestly was pretty fortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, people responded very well.
Good.
And I've truly been blessed. I have been, with people supporting the store in a small community. So they were excited. Of course, when you have a family of 7, me and my wife and then 5 kids, a small rural community is very excited about growing families being in the area, and which that way our kids are able to give back too. I mean, it's not just me and my wife being adults, but our kids are able to help in the community. Our kids are able to be parts of programs in school, the sports, drama, music, all those kinds of things. I mean, it's not just. I feel like that's their business. They're helping out with those kinds of things in school. We're doing all our businesses, and we're able to both support the school and the things that go on in the school.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of rural communities may be hearing this and thinking like, oh yeah, we would love to have a energetic family of 7 come to our community. Were there things that Wessington Springs was doing that made it more possible for you to say, yes, this is a place where we can go to? I mean, obviously it really helps to have the family connection. And that's true for many rural communities of what can bring you to the community is a family connection. But if communities are thinking about how do we get your family to come to our community, or a family like yours maybe 10 years ago, are there things they should be thinking about that make that possible?
I mean, if you're able to have all the essentials that a person needs in that community, grocery store, hardware store, gas, gosh, I mean, I don't think you really have to go outside of Wessington Springs to get much unless it's the clothing and that kind of stuff. But I mean, pretty much the essential things that you need, you can purchase in the community. So I would say that would be the most important part of it. I mean, when we were looking at moving, I mean, we didn't own the grocery store at the time, but that was one of our things. We can get everything that we need here in Wessington Springs, South Dakota. Of course, you have to go out for some stuff, but everything that you need, we can certainly get. So, it's sustain that way. So
definitely. Is that Do you think that's something that's become harder for smaller communities, is kind of keeping all those things within their community? I mean, I think it's become tougher for some of the communities that are closer to larger centers, but I wonder if for somewhere like Washington Springs, it's been more.
It is tougher. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it certainly is tougher. I mean, that's where community, or not community, customer service, really comes into play. You know, with the internet, you can order anything online. You can have it shipped to you. So and that really does hurt the rural communities where everything can be shipped. So you really need a loyal community in order to be able to sustain having all these businesses, because everything can be shipped in, or it's and and I think it's important that we need to, as a rural community, need to start educating um, the younger generations of the importance of having these um, amenities in our community, because they've they haven't they've grown up with the internet. They've grown up ordering whatever they want. Well, when you order things and order whatever you want off the internet, that hurts the community, because then you're not purchasing in the community. The tax money is not staying in the community. Or you go to, I'm gonna say Walmart. It's
yeah,
a,
yeah.
you go to out of town to a big box store. I'm gonna say it's not just Walmart, big box store, and purchase maybe for a little bit cheaper, but um, you know, but then when it comes into an emergency and you need it, a snowstorm, whatever it is, that business isn't there, and guess what? You have to go without,
Yep.
or travel in a snowstorm to get some of those things. So I really think it is important that the younger generations um, probably, you know. I graduated when the internet was just kind of coming out, email and that kind of stuff. So, I understand, the importance of it, where anyone probably younger than me doesn't quite get that. So I just think it's an education of, the dollar that's spent in your community, how many times it actually turns around. So, and I know that our paper has done that story a couple of times of, you know, this much dollar, and every time it's spent in the community, it turns this many times. So I just think that's really important. So
Definitely, definitely. You're leading right into the next area I wanted to talk about is, you've got these small businesses and thinking about what does having a small business, a locally owned business mean for a community like Weston Springs? Obviously, you touched on a few things, but just thinking through, the impact of having that, and like what you've seen as being an owner of maybe the impact you didn't expect that your businesses are able to have in the community.
yeah, I mean, honestly, and it's not just my businesses. I mean, there's many businesses in Washington Springs that you know that support. I mean, we probably get a request. Gosh, one or once or twice a month for stuff from the school or kids, or that kind of stuff that we try to support. So without businesses in the community, I mean, the schools had to come up with some of that funding on their own, or have a fundraiser on their own, and just the impact of having a main street and having to be able to have that business on Main Street. I think it's important for any rural community to be able to sustain as being a small community, with the schools, with if you don't have a grocery store, and I say that because everyone needs to eat.
Yep.
If you don't have a grocery store, you got to go get it in a different community, and then you're picking up this and that, and then your tax dollars um, get depleted, or and then you can't fix the roads and you can't fix that. Well, that's where I think it's important that purchasing local to be able to have upkeep to our community. I think that's very important.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And thinking about, this is a concept that you talked about earlier, but just having everything you need in
Hmm.
your community. I mean, not everything you'll ever need. No community has
Right.
everything you'll ever need, but having those things so that on a day-to-day basis, you can say you don't have to go drive 45 minutes to go get groceries or something, right?
Exactly.
Because if you don't have that, I mean, it's going to be really tough to keep your community moving forward.
Right.
And having all that contained, and the ability to say like, yep, this is a community where you can come and have all of this, makes a big difference.
Yep.
How does that? I'm curious for Wessington Springs, for example. Is there like medical emergency services, that type of stuff. Is that stuff that you have in Washington
We do.
Springs? Or
Yep.
okay,
Yep. So we have a hospital.
Okay.
And we have a long-term care facility in Springs, and we actually it's an Avera hospital.
Yep.
So we have the ability, and we have ambulance service. So we have the ability to have a helicopter fly. So if they need to be flown out, so we have the ability of a landing pad for a helicopter to take us to Sioux Falls or to a bigger facility. So. And we also we do have an airport local by. It's a mile out of town. So if we need a fixed wing, we can get a fixed wing. So, and we also have a clinic. Horizon Healthcare is a clinic, and so we really have everything that you need in a community.
Yeah.
For the if someone gets hurt, if someone needs services, we have all that available. So
You bet. I mean, that makes a big difference for a lot of folks, I think, is to know, like, okay, there's medical services in the community.
Yep.
I mean, and anywhere pretty much in the state. If you're not in Sioux Falls or Rapid City, if there's certain things going on, you're going to end up in Sioux Falls or Rapid City. But it's nice to have those medical services in your community too, and all those pieces.
And we have a medical provider. We have a medical provider, and I think we employ 3 at our local clinic. So.
Yeah.
So I mean that's huge to have those professional services available, and not every rural community has that opportunity. But we are fortunate to be able to have those professional jobs available, even for people that are looking for professional careers. So
yeah, and I think it might surprise some folks who don't spend a lot of time in rural communities how many rural communities actually do have a hospital or things like that. I was in a few years ago. I was working in Burke, South Dakota, which is maybe a little bit, or it's about the same size as Western Springs, maybe a little smaller.
Yeah.
But I mean, they have a hospital there, and pharmacy, and all this stuff, and it's like, wow. I mean, this is they have those things that you might think like hospital. Sometimes you think really big, but it also is. You've got those medical services in town. Two issues that I think a lot of rural communities communities all over South Dakota are trying to figure out are housing and childcare, which are critical for workforce. I'm curious, I mean, and I don't know if any community has all the answers on those, but I'm curious what those conversations have been like from your perspective in Washington Springs, and kind of.
It's funny you say that, because those are the biggest challenges that we have is housing. A lot of the houses that we have in Springs are older homes, and what is being able to been fulfilled has been fulfilled. It's we've had a housing study done in Western Springs, but it's truly fun. It's funding. Of getting that in there. So I know that our development coordinator and our development board, they've been looking at some different items, and that's why we did the housing study of what we need. And of course, it's single family housing. We need starter homes, but a starter home isn't cheap anymore. A starter home is you need a nice salary in order to be able to afford some of those starter homes. And in rural, that's just unfortunately, working at the grocery store probably isn't going to be able to get you those get you a house like that. So we do have apartment complexes that are available in Washington Springs. So childcare, we're fortunate to have some childcare, at least, who our child goes to probably near retirement age. And also, and all of the childcare facilities that we have are in-home daycare. So we are fortunate on that part. Right now we have 3. Probably in a couple of years we'll probably be down to 2. And it's just there's always waiting lists, of course. So,
of course,
for those things. So, and that kind of sometimes deters people from having more children, because if they have to work, they have to have a place to have them. So, we do have preschool, but that doesn't start till age 4. But right now we're okay. But we always could use childcare services.
Absolutely.
And housing. So, housing is probably the main topic of discussion when we're talking about recruiting individuals to come into Washington Springs. So there's just no housing, and it comes up all the time.
Yep. I mean, and this is one of the things that, well, first off, housing and childcare are not issues that are unique to rural communities, right? Everyone is experiencing this. Sioux Falls, big cities outside of South Dakota, everybody's experiencing how do we do housing, how do we do childcare. But yeah, it is so tricky right now. It's just expensive to build stuff, and so building those starter homes can be tough. And kind of figuring out as how do we get this additional housing? It's tricky for sure.
Right.
Are there options for seniors in your community who are maybe reaching the point where like, oh, it would be nice to live on single level, or open up some of that housing stock for a new family to move in? I mean, this is one of the things that we're trying to figure out with rural communities. And people want to stay in their community, right?
Yep,
And
yep.
so
We do have a couple options.
Yeah.
Not necessarily housing units. We do have a couple of duplexes that are around town that either retired farmers. They tend to come and move into some of those duplexes. We also do have a couple of one-level apartment units that are actually attached to our health facility. So, which is really nice for some of those elderly people that if they can't drive, don't want to drive, don't want to go out in the winter, you can actually access the hospital from both we have it's called the north and south complexes. You can access the doctor's office, the hospital, anything from that complex without even going outside.
nice,
So it's
nice. Yeah, that's
Yes,
awesome.
you can walk to the doctor's office just all indoors.
Yeah.
So it is. So we've seen a lot of people, a lot of retirees move into those apartment complexes also, and then we deliver groceries to them, so they never have to leave.
Wow. Yeah.
They never have to leave that complex, because some of them can't drive, some of them don't drive.
Yep.
But they don't need the long-term care yet, and still want to live on their own and are able to live on their own, but still want that satisfaction of I can get to the doctor if I need to get to the doctor, or the emergency room, or if something happens, I'm right here. So
Yeah.
Yep.
That continuum of care where, well, I need a few services, or, just need this or that, but I don't need everything. And then
Yep.
kind of creating those opportunities for folks to move up that ladder.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like the lady who comes in and asks you about just anything and everything in town, we've gone all over the place here, but I've loved it. One of the things that I'm curious about, you were touching on this about the, importance of, shopping local as opposed to some of the big box stores for the impact it has in the community. And one of the things I've thought about around this conversation is sometimes I worry about the way we can have these conversations. If sometimes the conversation gets simplified to, well, I know it would be cheaper to go somewhere else, but we need to shop local because then we can sponsor the T-ball team. And that's kind of the conversation. Right. But I think one of the areas where there's real opportunities to say, what is the unique value that having a local business has for the community? I mean, you talked about some of that, of the economic impact, but also the experience you're getting. And, an example I think of here in Sioux Falls is we have a local news outlet called Sioux Falls Simplified, and it's locally owned and locally operated, and you can see the real value of that compared to other media that's reporting on the area, because they're investing in the community and they're making a difference. And that's something I happily pay for, even though a lot of it's free. I invest in that because I'm like, this is a good thing for the community, and I'm glad it's here. I don't know, we touched on this a little bit, but I think it's just important to think through, how do we think about how these local businesses, the added value that customers are getting from having a local business, as opposed to if that local business is gone,
right.
you're really stuck.
I think a big added value is I know 95% of my customers by name.
Yep.
I know that they want that box of crackers, or I know that they want that cut of meat, or I know they like this kind of milk. Without them even telling me. To me, that's added value. Just from the being able to be friendly and knowing them, and knowing, if they're sick, one day, or can't come to the store, I can deliver that. I can deliver it to you. If it's too heavy for an elderly person, because we do have elderly people in Washington Springs. That's probably at least 50% of our population. They can't carry their groceries into their house. Well, I can, if I'm walking up and I notice that might be a little too heavy, I could say, I'll bring that to your house. I have no problem, running out real quick, bringing that to your house. I think those kind of things are important. Individualizing in individuals of, this person might need help, this person might not need help, but just knowing what they need, knowing to be concerned, and they appreciate that. They find appreciation of being able to be helped out. They don't always like it because they're not, used to that, and they're the ones used to, of course, it's many times it's the female that's shopping. They're used to taking care of the kids, the husband, everything. They're not used to being waited on,
Yep.
their own. So I just think sometimes it's they get apprehensive about it, like, no, you don't need to do that. Well, I mean, I want to do it. Those are things that
Yeah.
I want to do, and the value of having a building on Main Street, making your town. I mean, that's what your town is made of. The people that run those businesses, your town is made of those people. Their kids, and it's not just me right now. It's those individuals who are still living. They built this community. They built this community up, and they want to see it, survive. They want to see it still out there being part of their community, because if you lose some of those businesses, things, it just seems to continue to go deteriorate, per se. If you have one business go down, then another business, because then you have to go out of town to get this thing and that thing. So I just think, having those buildings full on Main Street is just important. We're fortunate that we still have a local paper, a locally owned paper. Christy Hine does an amazing job of covering our community, our stories, everything that's in it. And I think that's an important asset to our community also. Those different news items to get to everyone in the community. So, and the people that don't live in our community anymore that still care about our community, and come back home, they still have an outlet in order to get that information. So
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think you gave just a great example of, I just always fear when the conversation becomes you need to sacrifice in order to support your local businesses. But I think you make clear it's the opposite in Washington Springs, right? You want to shop at the local grocery store because you get a better experience. It's more convenient. And look at all the benefits that it has for the community. It's, downtown. You can get your groceries delivered if you need it,
Yeah.
and and just like that's something that you can't get from a big box store, right? I mean,
Right.
you can get it delivered, but it's a
you
whole
can
different
deliver,
process.
but it might be
Yeah, it's not.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah. But I think that's awesome. I mean, I think the other thing that I'm curious if you've experienced this in Washington Springs, but I think one of the cool things about a small town is, in Sioux Falls, you can kind of get lost in a sea of people, but in a small town, you can see a problem, and you can get a few people together, and you can solve a problem,
solve a
right?
problem pretty quickly. Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
which is.
Yep. Yeah. It you know who you need to call. You know who runs this. You know who runs that. Get it called and get it taken care of, and then everyone's happy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
We just had a successful basketball season this last season. Boys basketball and our girls basketball was successful also. But just to see the following of, when you do make it to a state tournament, and the following that really has in the community, when the community really comes together, it's really amazing, and it's heartwarming to know that it's not just the parents of the players that are getting together. It's the older generation that comes in also, continues to support these events. It's really neat. We just had our local musical, our drama department, and I think it was a sellout crowd for three plays. Like
Wow,
you
that's
literally,
awesome.
so we have an opera house. So it's got an old stage, a pretty cool place, and that's where the plays are held. And it was sold out every night. So I mean, just the support that you get in a small community like that these kids get is just really heartwarming, because my kids are part of it.
Yeah. I mean, that is something that's really awesome about a lot of rural communities, I think, is the way that the school is the hub of the
It is.
communities in many ways. And people, whether or not they have kids in school, people are invested in what's happening with the sports teams, what's happening with the drama programs, like you were talking about, and all of those things. And that's something that, in a larger place, it can sometimes get people have a lot going on. It kind of gets lost a little bit more, but in a small town, you can kind of focus in on everything that's at the school, and that's a really unique experience for kids to grow up into.
It is, and I like that. Like you said, the school is a hub, but the school is the hub of our community because we have the kids and whatnot. But all the businesses that are in our community are as of important, because without those, people wouldn't be moving into our community, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Right.
Or, finding their home in our community. So the school serves as a hub. The businesses support the school. So it's
Yeah.
a circle of life, but it's not life. It's a circle of the economy.
Right. I mean, and it goes back to what you were talking about earlier of the importance of, those local dollars that are invested into a community. I mean, those help fund the school, right? And
Yep.
then it circles back, and people can live in the community because there's businesses that
Yep.
bring them in, and then they bring their families, and the kids go to the schools, and
Yep.
it all kind of feeds together. But it is amazing how closely and tightly interconnected that is.
It is.
And it's really special about a small town.
I mean, sometimes I get not made fun of, but sometimes I'm at our elementary school 2 or 3 times a day, delivering something or taking
Yep.
something there, or somebody needs something. But I'm happy to do that, because then I feel connected with their school.
Yep.
If they need something, I'm like, yeah, I'll bring that out there. Yeah, I'll do this. And then you just feel really connected. Where sometimes I think in a larger city, you don't get that. You're not able to do that.
Right.
Of course, you have to check in and those kind of things, but just kind of wave my hand. They don't, hi, Ryan, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to take this there. And
Yeah, you don't need an ID because they know who you are,
Exactly,
right? And
yeah.
who all your customers are, and you're
Exactly,
saying,
yeah,
oh,
for
you
the
must
most
be
part,
new
yeah.
in town, like
Yep,
yeah.
And one thing, and being in a smaller rural community, you're involved in everything.
Yeah.
If you want to be involved in it, you're going to be involved in it. Or if you say yes to something, there might be 5 different things that you're involved in. But I mean, that makes it part. Being on Main Street, it makes it fun to live in the community. You're busy constantly. You're you're part of this board, and then you're part of that board. But I mean, I always say serving on those things is paying rent to your community.
Yep.
Because you have to serve on those kind of things to make your community successful, and you have to volunteer. Your volunteerism is your rent.
Yep.
For being able to live in that community. So
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's something that, every once in a while I'll see just online someone will be saying, oh, I'm getting ready to move to South Dakota. I got a job in a rural community or something, but I'm worried that there's not going to be enough to do. What's going on? But I think the reality is in a rural community, there's a lot to do. As soon as you get hooked into one thing and you're hooked into 10 things, right?
Yeah. I think one time we counted, there's 40 organizations
Holy
in
cow.
Washington Springs that you can be a part of.
Yep.
I mean, that's in a small community
Yeah.
of 900, that's a lot.
Yep.
If you take 900 divided by 40, that's not many people on each committee, or you know what I mean?
Yep,
So,
yep.
but that are part of it. So, and half of those are, able to be on the committees and whatnot. So I mean, truly, West Indies, we truly have anything that you need, we have it. So
Yep.
it became available, or we have it available. So.
Awesome. What should people know about Washington Springs is there anything that might surprise them about Washington Springs that they wouldn't know?
I'll just kind of go from east to west, what we have. So we have of course, an elementary school,
Yep.
and then we have our golf course. I think we have 7 churches, in our community. Of course, businesses that line all of Main Street. We have a nice swimming pool. There we have beautiful baseball complex, both the Little League and the Amateur League. We have the Owls, which is very big baseball community. The Owls baseball team, and we'll have an amateur team this year. We have, like as I said, the city is located at the foothills. That's where we have Foothills Days, which is it's kind of like a rib fest, and then we have a band that comes in August. But also within the hills, it's called the Old Gray Trail. It's about a mile-long trail that goes kind of in and throughout the hills. And that's actually technically about right behind our house. It's kind of cool to get on the trail, and the kids get, and then it actually ends up down by the swimming pool. And we just have a newly renovated swimming pool. I was on a committee that raised some money to do that. And it's a beautiful. It's like a little village. If you come from the east driving in, it is absolutely beautiful to drive up into the hill, and then you just take a turn right, and you're in the city. So, but if you keep going, you just keep going over keep going over to the hills. So,
Awesome.
if you look east, you can see all the way over to about Woonsocket. That's the next. So it goes Lane and then Woonsocket, but you can see on a clear day you can see all the way over to Woonsocket. So
Great. Well,
kind of
I
cool.
love that. I mean, I wish I could close my eyes and just getting this, audio description tour of Washington
Yeah,
Springs, and I
yeah,
can
yeah.
picture everything.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, that's fantastic.
When another thing, we have a annual rodeo. So we
Yep.
have beautiful rodeo grounds, and yeah, and I believe it's July. We have a rodeo coming up. So I don't know. There's like I
Fantastic.
said, there's always something to do. You
You
you will
bet.
not be bored in Washington Springs. I will tell you that. So
That's
yes,
awesome. That's
yeah.
awesome. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything we didn't get a chance to talk about today that you think we should talk about?
I don't think so.
Okay,
I
awesome.
just you know just talking to the people out there that are listening, if you're having hesitation, move back to a small community. I was one of those people, like I said, I wanted to be this big city guy, big suit and tie guy, for my whole career. And for the decisions I made, I would never look back. And I know it's not for everybody. I get it. It's not for everyone. Otherwise, all the cities would be bare. But if that's something that if you have the opportunity to move back to if it's your hometown or just a rural community that you want to start your life off in, I believe it's there's opportunities out there that may be looking for you. So.
Well, thank you, Ryan. You've been an awesome ambassador for small towns today and local businesses and the community of Washington Springs
Yeah.
specifically. It's been a joy to talk with you about all of this and hear your story. It's a fantastic one. So thank you for taking the time.
Well,
We
Burke,
really appreciate it.
thank you for the invitation. I mean, I was excited to do this, and I love talking about my community. I love Washington Springs. I mean, I truly do. It's my home, and it's my family's home. So
Great. Ryan Jensen, thank you very much.
thank you, Burke.